Okay, so first thing I want to say is I'm a feminist. There's no but in that, it's just straight I'm a feminist. The work that we've been doing today, and I have thoroughly enjoyed every presentation, it's really been excellent, this is not my area. So I ask questions like, well, if you're talking about serious games, what are the other kind? Are they like frivolous games? What are serious games? Why are certain things called serious games when they're actually about killing people? I didn't understand that. So, but what I thought I'd do is sort of beard the dragon, so to speak, and start with a really good question, which is, what is feminism? Now, everybody here will have a different answer, and some of the answers everybody here will think are wonderful, and some people will think are awful, and some of the answers most people here will think are awful, and other people will think are good. So there is no agreement on what feminism is. So I'm going to give you my definition, which is that feminism is the focus on gender. It's not simply about women, it's mostly about women. And why about women I'll come back to. But it's on how gender is done in the everyday, every night world. When did feminism start? Well, we know that there are some historical expressions. We all heard about the Amazons, right? And cutting off whichever breast it was that had to do with the arrow and so on. And that was a long time ago. But we don't know most of the expressions of feminist activity through history. I don't know it. The feminist record usually starts with the suffragette movement in the 1860s, 70s. How many of you have been to, I'm going to forget, something or other falls? Seneca Falls. They have a place. She's flat. Seneca Falls is in upstate New York, and there they have a place where Elizabeth Cady Stanton and all those women, those Quaker women, who were involved in the anti-slavery movement, who were involved in anti-alcohol, I hate to tell you this, and as well as suffragette, giving women the vote. And they have monuments to them there. It's really quite nice. It's important to note that any version of feminism was linked with other movements. So feminism never stands alone. It may have back with the Amazons. I don't know about the Amazons, I just heard about it. But with everybody else, feminism doesn't stand alone. It's part of other social movements. It's part of anti-slavery. It's part of anti-racism. It's part of questions about intersectionality, as we heard today. And the other social movements that it's connected with are those that are focused on social justice and equity. And that is a feature of feminism that has stayed from that early movement. Now feminism is about gender inequality and the social justice response. So feminism has been activist from the outset. So if you're going to call yourself a feminist, you gotta think seriously about what that means. Are you a closet feminist? Are you an behind the couch feminist? Are you the kind of feminist that goes out and tries to make changes in the world? And I think it's important to remember that issue about social change. The second wave of the women's movement came about late 1960s, and this was when Simone de Beauvoir and Betty Friedan and Shulamith Firestone were writing their tomes, and this was a time of great excitement. It was also a time of terror. Suzanne mentioned this morning that becoming a feminist is not the easiest thing in the world, because as you transform your worldview in the way that feminism requires of you, any kind of well, let's say probably, what's her name with the gun, probably didn't have to transform. Sarah Palin didn't have to transform her worldview. But feminism that's focused on social inequality, social justice, and activism, you really need to kind of shift your head. That's why consciousness raising groups are so important. They're the places where we could get together and talk about how the world was changing and how we were like excited and terrified about that change that was going on. when those changes happen, we're always in dialogue with other people, as you well know. So the changes then become something that goes on not just with yourself, but also in your relationship to other people. If you have partners, children, parents. And it's a very scary time. And it was probably, as I could say, the best of times and the worst of times, whoever said that. And some guy, yeah. And it really was exciting to make those discoveries. And that you really needed allies. And you still need allies. That was a time when there were many legalistic solutions. Sexual harassment legislation, access to abortion, human rights legislation, and so on, all came about at that time. The issues around race in the US, and as we could finally hear them in Canada, because we're a little slow at hearing that stuff, started to change, and the LGBTQ, what letter did I forget?
LGBTQ quilt bag, put in there questioning.
Okay.
Just say quilt bag, it covers everything.
Quilt bag. Somehow a little. Anyway, quilt bag. That was when Stonehenge, it wasn't Stonehenge, what was it? Stonewall. That happened in the late 60s too. See, I'm of an age now where I can just put dinner around and people will, figure out what it is I'm trying to say. These words, because I can't remember. Okay. There was during this time a huge feminist literature developed, and it developed in the academy, it developed in novels and poetry and literature and music. Very different approaches. And a number of ways of approaching the issue of what it means to do feminist research. And this is where I started working with Dorothy. And we were very focused on what it was like to do our lives, the work of our lives in the everyday and the everynight. And we did some really nice work on mothering. And if I had a few books, I sort of might buy them. But I don't have them with me. So what we began to see is that women, that they became principals. They became, a few became corporation CEOs, very few. Women were stars in shows. They might only have 2 lines, but they were starring in shows. And so it was like we didn't need feminism anymore. And I think one of the first presentations this morning talked about the post-feminism phase. Well, women are everywhere. Why do we have to do anything? And we thought back then that we could change the world. And we did. It's not the same world. Fortunately or unfortunately, we can't take credit for all of it. The economy is in terrible shape. I don't think we can take responsibility for that. That's those boys up in the banking industry. And national governments have less money, and we have this neoliberal kind of response to the social context that appears everywhere. Dorothy and I are just finishing a book looking at governance and the front line, trying to look at how the sort of changes in policy, the push towards the sort of downloading is what it's called. Downloading on, it's a very technical term, don't you think? Downloading. Downloading onto mothers, for example, the responsibility, is that 2 minutes? Okay. The responsibility for their children's schooling, because the school doesn't do it anymore because they don't have enough teachers or they don't have enough money. So there are questions that we still need to ask, and some of those questions are still not answered. And when we think about the question that Suzanne and Jennifer put forward this morning about what we need to do to think and act differently, some of the questions around that is how is gender embodied in everyday lives? And what's the context in which that gender is constructed? How do we explore that context without constructing women as objects of our research, or as gender as an object of our research? The so-called third wave has reminded us that there's new ways of being female. The girls, with the GER, has really sort of opened things up, I think, again. How lovely that things are opening up again, questions are opening up again. And the critique leveled at the essentialist notions of feminism has brought forward issues around intersectionality, which have not yet been answered to my satisfaction. I think there's lots of work still to do there. Very interesting work. And most important, I think, we need to remember the activist roots of feminism and the activist presence in feminism. How do we start from the standpoint of gender? How do we start in women's, and how do we start from the standpoint of gender? That standpoint is different depending on what the gender is and how that gender is expressed. How do we do gendered work that incorporates social justice and equity in communities, especially communities that we're not used to kind of hanging out with? How much time do we give to the nasties? I've discovered a new word, trolls. I thought that's what the Billy Goat's Gruff had to deal with, but anyway, apparently they're still around. And where should our energy go? Where does the activist energy go? Who are the allies? And how do we make those alliances? It's a different world now than when I first discovered feminism. And it's not as rich. Corporations are rich, individuals are rich, but the world is not as rich. It's much more individualist. There's more technological mediation between people, more top-down control of social movements and actions. And that means that there is much more work to do. And I look forward to seeing how you're going to do it.